African Renaissance. The concept that the African people and nation shall overcome the current challenges confronting the continent and achieve cultural, scientific, and economic renewal is here, with young men and women taking the lead. Some call them the new school heroes. We call them under 40 CEOs.
So I want to talk about what I call, how to travel with questions, or traveling with questions, if you will. That's how I put it, simply because, you have to give title to these things and all of that, So, yeah. And I say that because every time I have the opportunity to introduce myself somewhere, of course, people introduce you, etc. But when I introduce myself, I like to say that, which is the truth, that my career has followed the questions I've asked in my life. And that every major career move or change that I've experienced has been in the pursuit of a particular question. And I say that because at some point in my life, I believed I was one of the most intelligent people around my environment, But of course, I grew up in Ondo State and I hadn't come to Lagos. So later I found out. Then I went to Obafemi Awolowo University, OAU. And then they taught me that, you can be intelligent and, you're just wasting your time. And somewhere along the line, I ended up spending 9 years in Ife, which if you follow, what's the name of this comedian, Wole Arole, he says that that's the only university where you watch 2 World Cups and 3 Olympics before you graduate. And it's true. we did do that, yeah. And one of my pet peeves is that after 9 years, they only gave me a BSc. They should have given me a PhD because I've already accumulated the number of years and all of that. But I found out somewhere along the line that being intelligent and being brilliant wasn't really that important. And as I've gone along in my career, I found that to be, because intelligence is finite, yeah? There's a particular age your brain develops, and then it doesn't develop again, And there's a particular point that you get to, you are as intelligent as you can be, and then the rest is up to other things, and all of that. And so let me talk about the issue of questions and how that happened. So when I went to Ife because I wanted to become a pediatric neurosurgeon. You can see that I'm very exact. Yeah. And I had a very well thought out life plan. It was, if you know me very well, I like being organized. I joke that if my parents plan to die, they need to give me warning. Nobody must die suddenly because I will not bury you as you want. So if you want the big Nigerian burial, please give 5 years notice. I will save for you then. I'll tell you, I have the money now. Let me know where you want to die. So this is me in my natural state. Very organized, well-planned. Everything must go in a particular way. And as a young teenager, whatever, I grew up reading a lot of Reader's Digest. Great stuff to read. And I read there at some point several articles about a particular pediatric neurosurgeon by the name of Fred Epstein at Johns Hopkins University, who later became the mentor for Ben Carson and actually trained Ben Carson. This was before Gifted Hands. So I was amazed that this guy saving young people, children and all. So I said, this is what I must do. So I planned to become a pediatric neurosurgeon, train at Johns Hopkins University, do this till I was 65, retire and write novels till I die. Very simple, actionable plan. It's very straightforward, nothing complicated about this plan. I didn't plan to be rich, own a house in Lekki, none of those complicated things. This one was simple. And then after 4 years in medical school, one day, I walked to the notice board, and here was my matric number, 962547, withdrawn. I was confused that normally they will say advice to withdraw. At least you advise me first. Then I will let you know whether I want to withdraw or not. This is how normal people behave. But they just said withdrawn. We've made the decision on your behalf. This decision is very big for you, so let's make it for you. Just don't come tomorrow. This was a Monday evening. By Friday morning, I transferred to another department and became a psychology student within a week. So that was when I was visited by my first question, which is, if the future outcome or desire that you want doesn't happen, what do you do? What do you do? That question is the most important question in my life. It's the question that I carry around. I carry it around. Some of my colleagues are here. I carry it around even in running the business. So one of the questions we ask repeatedly is, if this line of business that we're doing, if tomorrow the clients say they don't want it anymore, what are we going to do? Do we shut down the agency and resign? And then you see a nice newspaper release, headline, Insight closes down. Feyi says, this is the end. And then, is that what is, it sounds funny to you, but every time I ask that question, I'm actually very serious. And they know. You understand? And that's where that question originated, because here was I, well-planned, well-thought-out life, very organized, and suddenly that life has changed. So the question now is, what do I do with myself? You understand what I'm saying? Very important question. And that question has changed my life completely and all of that. So the first thing that happened was, I talk a lot about the African consumer. So if you go on YouTube and type the African consumer, the first video you see is me speaking about this. And one of the things I say is that the African consumer has in their psychology an enemy. There must always be an enemy. So my parents concluded that it was some enemies in our town that did this. In fact, my father told me he went to consult some people and they told him that, your son, his star, some people are trying to block it. I said, I've not even seen the star. They are blocking star that I've not seen. So, of course, you know how these things go now. Parents are disappointed and all of that. And then, they stop funding you. I think you're an unserious human being and all of that. So I had to work now to survive in school. So the first thing I did was a graphic designer, which I found out after a while it's not that I wasn't good at it, because I don't want to say I wasn't good at it. I just found out that I liked only two colors, black and white. So anything you give me will come out in black and white. So, and people wanted colors. So I decided this one is not going to work. So here was I sitting on my bunk one day, wondering what to do next, and all of that. And then a friend of mine walks into the room. He's a medical student, was graduating, was much senior and all of that. And he had some money, was running a computer center, typing projects for people. And then this guy was complaining about how he paid a lot to do the data analysis for his project. And then, we used to use SPSS. And he talked about how he had the SPSS software, but he didn't know how to use it. And that if he did, he'd have made a lot of money from it. So I sat down there and I said to you, what if I told you I knew how to use it? He said, we'll be in business, we'll share 50-50. I said, go and print flyers and say you are not able to do data analysis. By the way, I didn't know how to use it. Yeah. So, but what was going on? At that point in my life, I discovered something very interesting. I discovered what, when they say you have a gift, I've discovered my gift. And I'll tell you how I discovered it. And how I learned that there's a difference between your gift and your talent. Your talent is something that you can do easier than everybody else. Yeah? Everybody can do it, but you just do it easier than everybody else. So, for instance, if you can recreate a bathroom around everybody can sing. How many of you know that? Yeah. If you are singing in the bedroom in the morning, you get it. The problem is outside the bedroom. It's not. But some people can sing easier. Some of you can sing given that you don't eat groundnut and eba before you sing. Some people, anything they eat, they will sing. You see some of these musical stars, they are always drinking, but their voice is okay. Some of you are in the choir. If you drink, you will not sing that Sunday. So They are talented because they can do it easier than everybody else. But what is your gift? What's the difference? So at that point, I was listening. I listened to a lot of, pastors and whatever. And then I heard Paul Adefarasin say then that your gift is what you have left when everything else has been taken away from you. And I think he was talking about Joseph interpreting dreams in prison. And at that point in my life, I realized one very interesting thing, that I could learn anything by myself and teach anybody. I'd realized that. So I knew that within 1 week, I would learn how to use that software and start using it. And that's why I told him that. So that's how I became a data analyst. Paid my school fees, did that, and all of that. And then somewhere along the line, I needed a job. And at that time, 9 years in the university, had an extra year. OAU prides themselves on giving you extra year. The way my mom put it then is they want you to understand the subject properly. That's, that was that theory. So I had one. But then I needed a job because I was taking only one course. Those extra years, they are always annoying. It's always one course. They never put 3, it's 1. So I saw this advert in the papers. And in there, they wanted a data analyst. It was at TNS RMS. I said the data analyst has to be 25, has to have a 2-1, and has to have served. Well, I didn't have any of the 3. I knew I was going to finish with a 2-2, which I rationalized by saying if you multiply 2-1 by 2, you get 2-2. So there I was. And, I hadn't served. I was around 25 or more then. So I was confused. I was like, I can go for this thing. So a friend gave me one fantastic advice for which I'm forever grateful to him. He said, when you write your resume, make sure you write a cover letter. And he said, make sure your cover letter is compelling. I said, why? He said, because if you write it and it's compelling enough, when they get to page 3 and they see that you have 2-2, it will not affect them. They will still want to talk to you. So I did that. And I got called for the interview. So I walked into this interview, and then they finally found out that I hadn't done NYSC. And I was sitting in front of them, and I was still in school. But they found out something else, that of all the candidates interviewed, I was the only one that knew how to use SPSS. So, first job. First real job as a data analyst. So, again, here was I working as a data analyst at, I was RMS then, now it's TNS RMS. And then again, I had another question. And the question was, I will do this data, I will analyze it, I will turn it into tables, Excel tables, and then I will send it to some people called market researchers. And those were the guys that will interface with the clients now. So I began to ask myself that the data that I send, what do they do with it? Do they even interpret it right? Do they understand it and all of that? So I began to follow that question. I will go and ask the researchers, how do they do it? How do they present the report and all of that? And as I did that, at some point, it became clear to the company that I could be a market researcher. And somewhere along the line, I got moved to the market research department. And then I began to do market research. And then at some point, I had another question. And the question was, we'll do this research report and send it to the clients. They will say they are doing strategies with it. How do they formulate the strategies? What comes out of it? Do they even make the right decision? What decision did they make and all of that? So I decided to move which then to me was the client side, because we used to do a lot of research reports for ad agencies. So I decided to move to an ad agency. So I ended up at Insight. And I came into Insight primarily as a market researcher, but I was sitting in the strategy planning department. Sorry, I need to follow my notes so I don't overtalk. And then, one of those days I was sitting down there, and all these guys around me doing planning, speaking strategy, everything. It was looking very sexy and all of that. I would sit at my table and just be analyzing data. I'm like, this data thing, it's not... So, I asked myself another question. This question was not original to me. It's actually from Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart, where he said, how can I live on the banks of a river and wash my hands with spittle? So I asked myself, how can I be in the midst of strategic planners and I don't know strategy? So one of the planners resigned and there was an opportunity. So I went to my boss then and said, this strategy thing I'm interested, I'd like to know. So he said, read this book, read that book, do that, do that. That's how I started doing that. And I found that I love strategy. So everybody will go home, I will stay back. I'll be reading books, reading articles, doing all kinds of things. And eventually, I became the head of the department, which was nice because here was I, planning director, feeling funky. And director is a very nice title, feeling funky and all of that. But one of those days, I looked around. I can't remember the event I went to. But I looked around and discovered that when they talk about people that move ahead in advertising agencies, they don't mention that strategy people. The people you see are usually client service people, or the creative people. They don't, So I told myself, it's like this is where I would die, and all of that. So, but then I said, okay, Feyi, if you were to, and I need to give you this question because I'll come back to it at some point, and I'm sure somebody will ask questions. I said, if you were to stay at Insight, you will never become more than this. That was my conclusion. Because I looked around me, I said, but if you say you should live Insight, what will you live with and what will you become? You will live. They will say, what's your experience? You are a planning person. So they will make you planning director again. I said, so, this is not working. You need to learn more about business and all of that. And at that point, I'd gone to Lagos Business School, come back. We were trying to do the strategy for the agency as a business, and I was put in charge of that. And then I was asked to implement that strategy, but I couldn't drive implementation because I didn't understand anything else outside of my department. I didn't know finance, I didn't understand accounting, nothing. So I decided, you need to go and do an MBA. So I went to do an MBA, And then somewhere along the line, while I was doing the MBA, another question came. This question was that, how can a company see the future and operate in a way that they arrive at that future? That question, is my current obsession right now, if you will. And, I began to have conversations around that. I began to say, okay, we've done strategy, we've put it together, we've put it out there, we said we'll achieve it in 5 years. Are we actually going to achieve it? Not only that, our industry was getting disrupted at the speed of light. All kinds of new players, different things happening, digital, whatever. The question was, there are many companies that have experienced this kind of disruptions, and they will ride it and move forward. So how can a company see the future and then, tap into it? So I began to pursue that question, and along the line, I was given the opportunity to become the general manager of the business. And then I did that for a while, and I think, to punish me for my sins, they decided to make me the MD of the business. And say, okay, go and run the thing since you are talking about this, your questions and the future. Yeah, you too, go and try it and all of that. So that's where I am. I thought that's the only thing I can really offer you. See, because if you want to know what it means to be a CEO, I think you can read that in a book, in my view. If you want to know what it means to be an entrepreneur, there are people that can tell you that. But here's my belief. I believe that questions are more important than answers in life. And in Africa, we are not trained to ask questions. We are just trained to accept things. We don't ask questions a lot. I hear young people say, what do you want to do by 40? I want to become a CEO. That's an answer. But what is the question? Why do you want to become a CEO? What do you want to do with it? Except update your LinkedIn page and selfie on Instagram. Okay, you've done that now. What next? What are you doing with it? Being a CEO is a tool. It's not an achievement. It's a tool. It's a tool to do something. You get what I'm saying? And everybody has the title. My tailor is a CEO. It's only him, but he's a CEO. Yeah? Questions are more important than answers. And you see, I believe that that's actually the difference between greatness and ordinariness. Great people, the difference, what separates them is that behind the scenes, they ask different questions. It's the questions that you ask that actually And it can be questions that pertain to your life, like when I was asking myself, now that they've kicked me out of medical school, what am I going to do with my life? Or it can be questions that pertain to the business that you're in. Remember that at some point, I was convinced that I would not become anything more than what I was at Insight. At some point. But as I began to follow the questions that came, I ended up where I am. Yeah? And I think a lot of reasons we don't come up with solutions, even when you go and start your own business or do whatever, and the businesses don't take up to the next level, is because we don't ask questions. We just take templates and then we run with it. We don't really question why. We're more satisfied with living and trying to succeed within the existing system than questioning the system and wondering, why can't the system change? Why can't it change? Let me lighten the thing because people are looking too serious. If you watch TV and you watch two black people arguing, yeah, someone will say, I think that the sky is going to be blue today. Here's the response you most likely get. Are you saying that the sky will be blue? How do you know? You know, they'll say things like that. If you see two Western people arguing, they tend to argue with questions like why. They question your reasoning. You understand? They check it because that's the paradigm. Why? You know, why can't things be different? And you see, I've studied every great man that I know, every great achiever that I, both contemporary and otherwise, they always had great questions. Or a great question, if you will. Gimokude. His brother, I read the story. His brother went to Harvard, came back, and brought a book and said, I read this book. And the book, Buy In, talked about how some guy in the US, the company was working in as a staff. He ended up buying over the company. And Ike said, you mean I can buy over the bank I'm working in? And he called his friend and said, let's do this now. And then they bought over the company. Staff. Just a question. Different. There were people in that same company that were angry. Look at the kind of salary they are paying. Stupid people. They are just using us in Nigeria. And that's all. Some even went to church to pray, God, the next promotion, Lord, give it to me. They fasted, they prayed, they did everything. But this guy asked a question, why can't I buy over this company? And he did. The Fola Adeolas of this world, looking at the banking system and say, is this all that is possible? At the age of 32, 30, 31, sat down in one of their flats and started creating what became GT Bank. Started with a question. Questions are more important than answers. Always. And you see, your journey in life, at least in my experience, will follow the questions that you are asking. And if you don't like where you are, you need to ask yourself, what questions did I ask to get here? Or did I even ask any question at all? Or just woke up and your mom still looked at, you know maths, you should be an engineer. And then you studied engineering. For what? People who know maths work on Wall Street. They don't build bridges. They're different, you know? And so if you don't like where you are and you want to move forward, then you need to ask different questions and all of that. And then you must have the courage to follow the questions. You can check this over and over. You know, so we at ad agencies, we're always part of a group, you know, sort of. So top 3 groups, Insight is part of Publicis group, which is number 3. There's Omnicom, there's WPP. WPP is run by a man called Martin Sorrell and all of that. Everybody knows him. Martin Sorrell used to be the head of finance for one of the agencies within the network. And one day, he looked at it and said, you know what? I think I can run this business more efficiently. But the only way I can do it is if I buy the company and I own it. And at that time, he had registered one company by the side to do PP, wire, paper, and print. Because he wanted to go into printing business. So he shortened it to WPP, raised enough fund, and bought over Saatchi and Saatchi, and then started buying all the others and put all of them under WPP. And today is the leading ad. If you talk about thought leadership, you will mention him. But he was an accountant. If you look at Publicis Group, the CEO, the chairman that is stepping down there, Maurice Levy, was the IT manager within the company. And then he began to engage differently, and at some point the founder of the business looked at him and said, I think you can take this business into the future, and handed it over to him. He's handed over to an interesting young man now. I've met him once. I actually like the guy, a man called Audu, 45-year-old guy, brilliant. Audu, as is properly called, left school, went to Chile to start an ad agency, came back to France, was working in an ad agency, TBWA, was so good that he entered a board meeting one day at the age of 30, and they made him MD CEO and all of that. Fantastic. That is, then, if Fab had been running under 30 CEOs, he would have featured. So they made the guy CEO at 30. And the following day, he resigned. You know why? He said, if I become CEO at 30, I will not grow again and I will not learn anything. And I still had a lot to learn, so he left. And then went to Publicis Group, and 15 years later, they handed over the entire group to him to take it to the future. Look at that. Look at that. You know, you and I would have shared testimonies in church and danced. You know. But he asked himself a question, like, if I become a CEO at 30, what else is there for me to learn? Nothing. You know. And then he made that move. You know. So let me round up by just I have a feeling I've taken more time. Let me round up by just stressing that point again. You know, what are your questions? What are your questions? Think about that. It matters. Changes everything. You know. And that your journey through life, through business or whatever, tends to be stronger with the right questions. And you see, if you don't have a strong journey, you can't leave a great legacy, no matter what you do. And ultimately, I think that's what matters, isn't it? Yeah, we all die one day, move on. There have been CEOs before us. There will be CEOs after us, and whatever. But what you leave behind is always a function of the strength of your personal journey. And that journey is a function of the right kind of questions that you ask yourself. Thank you.